Welcome to TestTube, a place where we can share our knowledge through short videos. Even you can contribute to us by making a small video of any problem that you face in your life and how you have solved it. The video can be as short and as simple as possible, and you upload it in your Google Drive and share that link to us through that email that is shown over in this video. This way we can build a rich library having solution to any problem that anybody could possibly face in their life, and they can find a solution over here in this comment space. And by the way, the video will be uploaded with your name on it so that you can have all the credit for this. Thank you. In this video we are going to see how to integrate APIs in Rest Assured. So in our earlier episode, which is 7, we have seen the API automation using Rest Assured, and it is in its simplest form. Alright, now this is going to be one more step ahead in wherein you wanted to use integration of APIs. In this video we have explained a situation which will lead to the integration of APIs. Okay, and in fact there are 3 parts to a video, which is episode 8.0, 8.1 and 8.2, and all these videos are interrelated. So once you see all these 3 videos, you will understand how to integrate APIs in Rest Assured. That is explained in 8.0, and using this example we have explained what is inheritance, and that is explained clearly in episode 8.1, and what is abstraction and why do we use it, and what are the benefits, and what are the situations that led us to use the concept of abstraction, and it is explained in episode 8.2. So if you watch all this, the same example is used across all these 3 videos, and that way you will understand this Java concept not just in theory, in such a way that you will never forget what are these concepts and how they are used and when they are used. Alright, so in this particular video we'll just see how to integrate APIs in Rest Assured along with little bit of polymorphism. Okay, let's move on to the video. In our earlier session we have seen the sample API automation framework in its simplest form, right? So that is in episode 7 we have seen that, wherein we have this folder where we have all our test cases maintained, and we have here where the reusable methods are defined, we have here where our data is maintained, and the TESTNG XML sheets where we maintain which test case to be run, and we have a placement for reporting. This is TESTNG reporting and this is ExtentReporting. So this is how a framework can be in its simplest form. So we just have to add a test case. So we had these test cases earlier, and this class earlier, and under this class we have many test cases, and in our previous session we have created this test and added to already existing test cases, and we have seen how simple it is to add the test case to this existing framework, and we have done the assertion for this test case, and we have printed that in our extent report. So that's what we have seen, how we have added the test case to the existing framework. Now we are going to talk about how do we integrate APIs. So before we see how do we integrate APIs, first let's try to understand why we have to integrate APIs. To understand that, let us get back to the manual test cases. So this is the Postman application. We have seen these types of requests earlier, wherein get user, post user, put user. So now I have this additional request created over here, which is to register the user. So what I wanted to do is I want to register a user, and in the body I have to pass this email and the password for that particular user. And I run it, and then I will see the response over here like this. Now, if you carefully observe this particular email ID, so how I'm going to give that email ID? This is something which I'm giving manually, but in some cases it will be like this will be um, a response of some other APIs. So in our case, let us observe this get users API. So if I run this, it has returned this response, and it has returned various users with different IDs and the email addresses. And for example, I wanted to register the user of having ID 7, for example. So then what I have to do is I have to fetch the person who is having that ID, and I have to fetch that email, and then I have to register that person using that email by calling this register API by passing that email address over here. So what does it mean is, in this situation I have to run this API and get some information from that API and pass the details into this API. So which is a sort of chaining these two APIs. That means to achieve this, we have to integrate these two APIs. Integrate in the sense we are running this API, and the response of this API is passed into the input of this API. So this is the case where we wanted to do API integration, and this all has to happen automatically, and that's what we achieve in our automation. All right, so now let us see this how this is done in our automation project using REST SU framework or 2. Right, now let's go back to the code. So this is our set of tests which we have already seen. We don't have register user over here, so what I have to do is I have to add that particular test. But in order to explain this concept separately, I am trying to use a different class itself just for this particular test, and which is nothing but API orchestration. So before I show that, I want to explain how naturally we are going to use the concepts of Java in order to achieve this particular integration. So we have seen that we have to run the get users request, right? So first we run the get users request, and then from that request we are going to fetch that email ID. So that's what we are going to do, right? So here we have get users request over here. So now I have to run this and I have to collect the response. So that's what it is. So we have already a test case which is running this one and also capturing the response. So what we can do is we can reuse this particular test case, and we have to collect some information from here and pass it to the register user test case, right? So at the same time we have a validation of this test case also. So what does it mean is we are going to reuse a part of this test for our new test case to be done. So that's what we are going to do. So what we have to do is we should not uh, remove this test case. At the same time we wanted to use this test case, and again in both cases it is going to be get users test case is what we are going to use. So this get users test case is not returning anything, but we want our get users test case to return the response so that we can pass the response in our another test to use the information in it, right? So how do I achieve this? So this is naturally leading to a situation wherein we should have this method and it is doing the same thing what it is doing. In addition to that, it is also returning something. So while I explain this itself, it shows that I'm going to need the same method, right? So we are going to have same methods doing something slightly different to one another. So how this is achieved is by overloading the method. So why we have to overload instead of creating a different method is we are talking about ideally what I can do is I can create another method with a different name and do the same thing and make it return something, but I don't want to do it because I want to use the same name so that I will understand that this method is doing a fetch information of get users. So that's why I don't want to create a different method, because creating a different method with a different name will give a different understanding that it is entirely a different method. So I want to use the same method name, but I want to do it something differently. So this is achieved by overloading the method. So this is how the concept of overloading method is going to help us in this situation. And all this is something which we haven't planned. So this is something which came up naturally with the course of the project what you are trying to implement. So when I do this, it is becoming method overloading automatically, which is nothing but polymorphism. So here we are using the concept of polymorphism to achieve what we wanted to do. All right. So let us see how this is done. So what I'm doing is I'm going to create the same method, but with different arguments passed to it. And one method is returning nothing, and another method is returning something for me, which I can use it in to register the user. That's what it's going to happen. All right. So now let us see that. So what I have done is, in order to create clarity, instead of using this class, I have created a different class altogether, wherein I have done that. I have used this overloading concept and in more refined manner. So instead of using the code again entirely, what I have done is, since this is the code I am using it again in another method, what I have done is I have extracted the reusable part and created a separate method for it. I'll show you how it is done. So I have created this one, get users overloading class, wherein I have created two methods. One is get users head authentication, which is same exactly over here what it is doing, and along with that I also have created another method with the same name, and this method is returning something and it is taking some arguments in it. So this became method overloading, which is a static polymorphism in Java, right? So now what happened is I can do two things, like I can write a test case which is executing this get users functionality. So that is done by this one, and at the same time I can, I can't reuse this one in order to uh, do a registration because it is not returning anything, right? So for that purpose, without touching this, I can use this method which is returning the response to me, and I'm going to use this response over another test which is registering the user by extracting the email ID from this response. So that's it, simple, right? So this is what it is done, but I have done a little refined way. So here if you see, we have this method, inside it we have prepared the request, and then we have prepared the header like we have seen here. We have prepared the authentication, we have prepared the request here, and then we have called the response. So what I have done is, since we have anyways decided that we are going to uh, use the same code but two different methods, what I have done is I have extracted this common part and I have put it in another method called get users request. So this get users request method is actually preparing the request. So it is not calling the response, it is just preparing the request, which is setting up the header, setting up the authentication, setting up the content type, setting up the parameters. So this is uh, actually saving me a lot of lines of codes. Otherwise, what I have to do is I have to write those lines of codes over here in this method, and I have to write the same lines of codes over here in this new method which I have created to return something. So instead of writing it again and again, I have put it in this method, and I have written it once over here in the beginning of the class, and I have called that method in these two methods, the one which is returning something and the one which is not returning anything. So I have used in both the methods, and I have used this method in these two methods. So I have saved some code over here. So that is one thing, and this is not possible if I don't use the overloading concept, right? So here we have saved some code lines, and as well as we have achieved some more benefit of getting something using the same method. So these are the two advantages that we have gained when we use the polymorphism concept. So if I don't use polymorphism over here, what I have to do is I have to create another method with a different name, and it may lead to a confusion, like that method by name, since it is going to be different, I may misunderstand that okay, this method is uh, getting the user details and that method is doing something else by the name. So that confusion will be avoided and code will be made simpler when I'm using this polymorphism concept. So that is why we use polymorphism. Okay, so now this is ready. So I have created some class which has having these reusable methods. What I'm going to do is now I'm going to create another class where I'm going to use these methods, which is calling that request and returning the response. And I'm going to use that response, and I'm going to extract the email ID value from that response. So that's what I'm going to do now. Created this API orchestration.java. So this is our actual test which I am going to use. So what you can do ideally is, since this is something which we have created for reusability purpose, what you can do is you can move this to a reusable folder over here. So instead of keeping it here, this is actually the place where we are keeping our reusable methods. But there is a difference. This is a reusable file where we have general reusable methods, but this is specific to the application. Since it is specific to this project and this application, we can actually create one more package over here, like reusables or reusable modules or something like that, whichever is appropriate to your project, and we can keep classes like this under that particular package, so that we will know, okay, we are keeping reusable methods specific to that functionality at some point, and then we can call it in any of our test cases like this. So this is going to be our actual test case. Okay, so for now I'm not showing that I am maintaining it under reusable modules somewhere created. Let us proceed ahead, but this is the actual way how you do a project when you are implementing a framework. So this is the actual class where I am going to implement what we have seen now, which is automating the register user with the help of API integration. So what I have done is, since I know that I am going to use the methods in this one, I have inherited something from that parent class. So I have inherited it. I have created objects whichever are necessary. So these are the objects which you will understand once you follow my earlier tutorials. And this is the variable RESP and RESP1 of type response. And now let's see. So what I have done is I have created this method called get users response. So what the objective, like I told, I'm collecting the response and then I'm going to use it in my post users. So what it is doing is, like I said, it is going to call this particular method. So you can see that I have created an object for this child class API orchestration, and it is referring to the parent class. So now I have access to the methods in this particular get users overloading Java class. So with that object, I called get users REQ, which is nothing but get users REQ over here in the base class, which is setting the request for me. So I have set that request and I have called the response. So that is what this particular method is doing. So I have run the API and I have collected the response into RESP1 variable, which is inside this class. So I can use RESP1 anywhere inside my class. Now I'm going to do the actual test, which is nothing but registering the user. So what I'm going to do is, in registering user, first step is I have to call that get user. So the same thing is what I have done here. I have this is something I try to do it in two ways. First, I try to do it in the direct way, which is nothing but I'm directly calling the method which has created just for this purpose. So I created an object for this class, and that is GU. I have called that object, and inside that object we have this method called get user authentication, which is returning a response type variable over here. So you see we have created this one, right? Just for this purpose we have created. So I call that one directly over here. So I call that one. Now we have that and we have collected it in RESP. See, it is returning response type variable and we have collected it in RESP. We have seen that RESP is of type response over here defined in this class. So that's it. We have done what we are supposed to do it. Now I'm going to use RESP1 to pass the JSON response. So my JSON response for get users is inside RESP1, which is nothing but this entire response is captured under RESP1 object for me, right? Okay, so now what I have to do is I have to find out somebody who is having ID 7. So for that, what I have to do is I have to pass that JSON response. I took a while loop and I tried to move forward till I see ID equal to 7. So what I'm doing is first ID is going to be 1 or 0 based on initially what it is declared. So yeah, it is declared as 0 over here. So ID is 0. When ID is 0, it is going to capture the ID at 0th position in that response. So we have seen it over here inside data. First element ID is what we are trying to see. If that value is kept in ID, if that ID is matching with 7, then we are coming out of loop. So like that it is going to iterate, and when the ID is met, it is coming out of that loop and I am capturing that particular instance, particular data instance. It is data 0 or data 1. If it is in the first instance in this case, so if it is over here, it will go to here and then capture that email ID from that one. So in that ith iteration, I'm going to capture that email. So here I found which I is having my ID. So once I found which ith iteration is having my ID, I'm going to fetch the email from that ith iteration. So that's what it is done. To understand it even more clear, you can watch another video on how the parsing is done in REST assured. So it will have even more detailed explanation. So let us leave it now. Now I got my email ID. Now I'm going to use that email ID in my post user response. So as usual, I am preparing the post user request. I gave the base URI, headers, and etc. And here I have defined the body parameters. Here I have put uh, the email ID as something which is captured in my email variable. So which is nothing but that email which I got from by passing the get users JSON response RESP1. So like this, I have passed the response of get user into post users request, register user request, and then I run the register user response, and then I captured it, and I have validated it, and I stored it in some Excel sheet as usual, as discussed in our previous framework sessions. So this is what it is, how it is done, uh, and that's it. This is how integration of API is achieved. Now let us run this test quickly and see the result. Here we can see that two tests are run and both are passed. Let us see what is done. Get users response code, register user response is this one ID 7 token, which is same as over here in our Postman when we run it manually. So this is something which we got for ID 4, but we try to run it for ID 7, right? So that's why we have seen a response for ID 7. So it has registered email ID of Michael Lawson, yeah, which is nothing but ID 7. So it is success, as we can see it over here. So that means through integration, we have achieved the test case which we wanted to run. So that's it on how do we integrate APIs and how do we automate them in REST assured. So here ends the topic, but however, with the help of this concept, I wanted to explain some old Java concepts like polymorphism and abstraction. So we have discussed already a part of polymorphism over here, but I wanted to mention it again and try to compare it with abstraction and explain what are the differences and what are the advantages of one over the other, and why we have to use these concepts, why we have to use polymorphism is something already we have seen this. So now let us move on and try to understand abstraction and polymorphism together comparatively. Okay.